Good morning, everyone. I know it's been a while since I have posted a video. I have been recovering from one surgery and getting ready to have another one in about a week, and that one is a major surgery and it's going to take quite some time to recover from that. And so what I thought I'd do is I need to make some homemade bread, and this recipe usually will make 3 loaves, but I'm going to turn it into 2 loaves plus some hamburger buns for dinner tonight. And so I just want to say I appreciate each one of you that have hung around. I know it's been probably about a month since I've posted a video. They will be still scattered as I go through the surgery and recover, but I have several things I've recorded that I am hoping to be able to put together in a video for you guys to have you watch something while I am recovering. I'm also going to be putting together a video of food prep. I am planning on doing a minimum of 20 freezer meals to make it easy on my family to just be able to pull out of the freezer, either pop in the oven, crock pot, thaw, and reheat, depending on what it is, because there's a variety of different things. So I'm going to be recording that as well. You guys will likely see that after I'm in my recovery time already, but I just wanted to again say thank you for those that have hung around and waited patiently. I really appreciate you. So I thought I'd just start with a quick and easy video to kind of get going again, and that's going to be again sandwich bread. So I will have the link below to the recipe that I found that is really great and really easy to put together. So let's get cooking on that, because I need to get my day going on some other things so that way I can be as productive as I can, so I can get as much done as I can before the surgery. Recipe is going to start with 1.5 tablespoons of yeast. So I like to go ahead and put in my yeast first. Now this recipe also, you could use sugar or honey. Today I'm just going to use sugar. Just because my honey has gotten stiff and I don't want to take the time to warm it up to be able to put it in here. So I'm just going to skip that and go with sugar. But if typically I will use just honey in this, but for today we're going to skip that process. So for the yeast, you're going to add 2 3/4 cups of very warm water. Now you don't want this water to be too hot because you can kill your yeast. I like to think of it as a nice warm bath water. There are people that will put a temperature for the water. I don't do that. I just do it based on touch. Again, for me, not a scalding hot bath water, but something that's really nice and warm is what I go by. And so I just poured the water over it. Now I'm going to grab my sugar, and then we're going to put a 1/4 cup of sugar in here. And sugar helps yeast to activate and to bloom faster. So let me grab the measuring cup. All right, and then I'm just going to sprinkle the sugar in there, and then we're just going to let this sit for about 5 or 10 minutes, depending on how long it takes for the sugar to activate the yeast and for it to bloom. And then once it has, we'll go ahead and add in the rest of the ingredients. While this is blooming, I did want to tell you, your yeast, now I buy it in the big packages from Costco, and then I just keep it, let me slide this out of the way for a second, turn this a little bit. I just keep this container in the refrigerator. Now I got this container from IKEA years ago, and this has worked great for holding 1 package of yeast from Costco. But just keep in mind, if you buy the little yeast packets from say Walmart or whatever grocery store you go to, those are shelf stable until you open them. Once you've opened them, yeast has to go in the refrigerator or it will rot at room temperature. And so now I keep my yeast in the freezer until I open up the bags and then put it in here. That just keeps the it lasting a lot longer. But in the fridge, I've never had a problem. Usually it takes me at least a year to go through an entire package of yeast, and that just depends on how much bread I'm making. We are trying to get back into making more of our breads ourselves versus buying store-bought. There was a period of time where we just had a lot going on medically, and so buying just made sense. But now I'm trying to get us back to homemade, because there's nothing better than homemade bread. So I just wanted to pop on while this is blooming and let you guys know that please keep this in the refrigerator so it doesn't spoil, because it will, and then it will not rise at all. Okay, As you can see, hopefully, I know there's a bit of a shadow casting because of the camera, but this is what you're looking for right here is the bloom. Once you see the yeast start to do this, you can go ahead and move on to your next step of adding the rest of the ingredients. But this is what it'll look like. It says bloom because it really does look like it's blooming up, because before it was just kind of a almost like a milky color, and then you'll see it. So that's it right there. Hopefully the camera is focusing in on it. It's hard to tell. So anyways, that's what you're looking for. All right, so now we're going to get the rest of the ingredients in because the yeast is blooming. And so to this, I'm just going to be adding in a 1/4 cup of olive oil. Now I will share this little tip. When I use honey, I won't add the honey to the water and yeast mixture. I'll just let the yeast bloom in the warm water, and then I will add the honey after it's bloomed. What I will do is I will measure the olive oil first, because what it does is it coats the measuring cup. So when you pour honey in there, it will help the honey slide right out. So just a little tip that if you do use honey, it just makes it a little bit easier to get the honey out. And now to this, I'm going to be adding in 2½ teaspoons of salt. And I just have the real salt that I use, but anything that you have will work. And keep in mind, it seems like a lot, but this is supposed to make 3 loaves of bread. And if you have a longer baking pan, or I'm sorry, bread pan than what I do, you could actually just do 2 long loaves, but I've got actually, I think I've only have 1 of those, and the rest are the shorter ones, which is why I get 3 loaves out of this recipe instead of 2. I found that 2 in a regular size loaf pan is too dense for us. It wasn't very good. Okay, so now this original recipe calls from anywhere from 6½ to 7½ cups of flour. That is based on where you live and how much humidity or the altitude that you have. I have found for us 6½ works great, but if you start with 6½ and it's still too sticky, then you are going to want to go ahead and add in at least ½ cup at a time until you reach that 7½ cups if needed. But 6½ has always worked for me, and of course we live in a state with a ton of humidity. We are in Florida, and so, but 6½ has always worked. But I think the higher altitudes you might have to use a touch more. So, all right, we're going to start that. We're just going to start to mix it on low. There are no eggs or dairy in this recipe. Now, the original recipe does say to brush the top for butter. I don't do that because I find that it's just not necessary to do, but you're obviously optional. But this is a great one that's dairy free and contains no eggs as well. As you can see, I'm giving it a really just slow go to start to get the flour incorporated in there, just so it doesn't go everywhere. But once it starts to really get mixing, sorry, the coffee maker's gone off. I'm going to turn it on about medium, about that high, and I'm going to let it knead for 6 minutes. So I'm going to go set the timer and let this go for 6 minutes. Okay, so what used to always, that last 30 seconds of the timer, I like to turn it up on high, just because a lot of times the dough will still be a little stuck to or looks a little sticky. I'm sorry, let me fix this. Okay, all right, so it's a little sticky on the bottom. I could add a touch more, but I feel like because there's just a little bit sticking to my hands, I'm not going to add any more. Now, a lot of times people will tell you you don't want it to stick at all, and it's barely sticking. It's sticking just a touch. The reason why I don't is because when I go to roll this out into loaves or buns, I'm going to be putting it on flour, and so that's going to incorporate some more flour into it. So I don't want to overdo it, because too much flour will make it dense, and I'm looking for my bread to be nice. So if you can see, like I said, it's just got just a slight little touch. Of course, you know, it's not too bad. You can always add more. If you make homemade bread and you're used to adding more, you can. I'm just going to kind of scoop it up a little bit, and then I'm going to grab just a touch of, I'm going to grab the olive oil and just put a touch in here. Maybe no more than a half to 1 teaspoon's worth. And then I'm just going to kind of roll, there we go, like this, sorry, the dough around. And what that does is it helps actually the dough from sticking to the bowl, or even, I mean, a little bit will stick to your hands just because there was already some on there. But if you start with clean hands, it won't. And when I say clean, my hands were clean before I started, but like without having some of the dough sticking to it, then it'll help even more, but it's not really that big a deal. And as you can see, I'm just kind of tucking, oops, you guys can't see that, I'm sorry. I'm rolling and tucking it under like this, and then I'm just going to leave my dough just like that. And so I'm going to cover it, and I'm going to put it in my oven. It does have a proof option, which I know most do not. You could turn your oven on like 180 degrees. As soon as it starts to warm up, shut it off, and then put your dough in there. You want it warm but not hot, because again, you don't want to start to cook the dough yet, because this needs to rise twice, once in the bowl and once when we roll it out. So I'm going to get this in the oven, and then I'm going to go hop in the shower, because this is going to proof for an hour, and then that way I look not as scary as I did in the intro of the video. So it's been a busy morning just trying to do stuff. So anyways, I'm going to get this in, and I wanted to say too, I forgot to mention, the recipe calls for all-purpose flour. I use bread flour because it makes it a little bit chewier, because there's a higher gluten content in it, but either one will work. And so I'll just put that in the description below so you guys know that. But I'm going to go ahead and get this in the oven and then hop in the shower, and then we will be back as soon as this is proofed. The bread dough has been in the oven for an hour now, and so I'm going to go ahead and take the towel off, and as you can see, it has more than doubled in size, and that is what you're looking for. Now, if you don't have an oven with a proof option, you could leave it out on your countertop, just find the warmest place in your house, or you could turn your oven on the lowest temperature for about a minute or two, just enough to just slightly warm it up, and then you can cover the dough and then place it in there. If you have to put it on a countertop, it may take a little bit longer than an hour to proof and double in size, and so that is just whatever you have, just kind of keep an eye on it. And so as you can see, I've taken the dough out, and I had floured the surface so it doesn't stick, and I just put it into a rectangle shape, and now I'm just cutting it into thirds, because we are going to be making, again, 2 loaves of bread plus some hamburger buns for tonight. And so typically I will just do 3 loaves, but instead of making a separate recipe for buns, I just decided to do it this way. It just works easier. Now, if you have a scale at home, a food scale, you can weigh the dough before you cut it up and try to figure out what the weight would be equal between all 3 of them. I opted not to do that this time, just because everybody was in the kitchen getting lunch and doing other things, and it was just easier for me to kind of lift it up and see what it felt like. And that third one was a little bit heavier, so I just pinched some off, tucked it underneath the middle dough, and then I just roll it back together. And so it's okay. It's still the one on the left of your screen wound up being just a slightly bigger, but that's okay. It's not a big deal. So I just take my bread pans, and I always make sure that I spray them really well on the inside, because you want to make sure the bread doesn't stick. And then just set it aside, get all your pans prepared. Now, you could do this ahead of time, but again, I was working with what I could at the time, just because everybody was in the kitchen at the same time trying to get their lunch. So when it comes to the dough, I'm basically just going to take the sides and kind of pinch them together and then roll it up. And so I'm just trying to form a loaf shape by pinching, and that's it. Once I have it put together, that's all you're looking for. And so that is going to go straight into the bread pan just like that. And that's it. And it's really super easy. So again, I'm taking the second one, and I'm taking the sides, and I'm kind of pinching and rolling towards the center. and then rolling it up into a loaf size, and then it's really easy, and that's it. You don't really even have to. You can tuck the ends in a little bit, but everything should hold together as long as that seam is at the bottom. Now you can kind of see on the right side of the pan it was a little bit thicker. It still winds up baking up just fine. It's not an issue. So at this point, you're going to want to cover with a towel. And don't worry, that towel, while it looked dirty, was just a little bit of the dough from earlier. So I always use a clean towel when I cover my bread. So now I'm going to work on my hamburger buns, and I'm just going to make sure that I spray my cookie sheet with a little bit of the spray just to make sure they don't stick. I just want to take a little bit of flour. This is again why I did not add any additional flour to my dough, even though it just was slight sticky, is because I'm working with flour as I am making the bread and the buns. So you just want to get a little bit of flour on your fingertips, hold your portion, and then you're going to pinch the edges over to the center. And while you're doing so, you're going to be cupping the dough ball with your hand, and you're just going to be forming a ball with it. But you want to make sure you pinch all of it together because you're trying to close that seam. And then you just flip it over and kind of roll it a little bit with your hands, and that's it. So again, you're going to take those open edges that you can see where I cut, and you're going to pinch that together and pinch it close while cupping it with your other hand to form a ball. And so once you kind of feel like they are good, the sides are good and closed together, you're just going to again form it with your hand and then set it aside, and you're done. Seam side will always be down on the pan, and that helps the bread from poofing out and coming undone as it's proofing and baking. And so I'm just going to finish with the last one, and then I'm going to go ahead and get everything covered and then put them back in the oven. And at this point, once they go back in the oven, everything will proof for 30 minutes, and then I will pull it out and then put the finishing touches on them before I bake the buns and the bread. And I also make sure at this point, while it's in that last 30-minute proof time, is I also turn on my oven, and that way my oven is preheating, because I've made the mistake in the past of not doing that until everything has proofed, and then my bread rose too high and it was fine, we still ate it, it was hysterical, and I couldn't fit it in a bag because it was too high. So now everything's going back in the oven to proof again for 30 minutes, and then it doesn't need to proof any longer than 40 minutes. If you need a little bit of extra time for something, you just have to keep an eye on it, because if you go too long, that it will get too high or too big depending on what you're making. So it's now been 30 minutes of everything proofing in the oven. So I just checked the buns and they're ready to come out. And while I'm putting the finishing touches on those before I pop them in the oven, I'm just going to leave the bread in there just for a few more minutes. So let's get the buns out. And as you can see, they have proofed up, and I don't want them to get any larger than that. The longer you leave them in there, the bigger they can get. So we're going to get some olive oil. Now at this point, you could do an egg wash, but I'm just going to skip that part, do olive oil. It's just easier and quicker, and then I don't have to use up an egg for this. And then I'm just going to sprinkle the buns with sesame seeds. Okay, so if you don't have olive oil or you want to do an egg wash, you could do butter. I'm just trying to avoid dairy for our daughter. I'm just going to put just a touch on there like that. And I'm just going to use my pastry brush to kind of coat them. This will still help them brown, which is what an egg wash will do. It'll give it a nice brown look to it, but so will butter. So will olive oil. Also, even if you just sprinkled a little water on it to put on the sesame seeds, that would help it stick as well. So I've just got these sesame seeds, so I'm gonna go ahead and sprinkle them on. All right, and you can put as little or as many as you want on them. You can see that one doesn't want to stick, so I must have missed it. There we go. I did. Totally. And there you go. They don't have to be perfect. This works. So I'm going to set this aside and we're going to go ahead and pull the bread out, and then we're going to put all of this in at the same time. Oops. All right. So as you can see, this, oops, if I can get it out. Hold on, I got it stuck on the towel here. Now typically I will measure the loaves, just weigh out the dough to divide it equally. Sometimes I can tell by lifting it, sometimes I get it a little off. You can see this one's just a touch bigger. I don't know if you can tell in the camera than this one, and that's okay. This is just for us, it doesn't matter. So you could at this point coat it with butter or a little olive oil. I don't do that because I just let it brown up naturally on its own for when it comes to loaves of bread. So we're going to get this in an oven. So for the bread, it's going to be 350 degrees for 30 minutes for the loaves. And then it's going to be about 15 minutes or so for the buns. So we're going to go ahead and get them all in. That timer set for 30 minutes. I'm going to set my timer on my phone for 15, and then I will be back when it's okay. So the buns are done, so I'm going to go ahead and take them off the pan and put them on a cooling rack, because that will help from when it cools, the moisture from the heat doesn't create a soft bottom. You want it to stay, it'll get soggy, and so it just helps if you move it right away over to a cookie sheet. And now we have 4 buns. Now I will say that when you use olive oil, while you can do it at browns, you could do egg wash. They don't, if you're not careful, you will easily knock off the sesame seeds. So you can do an egg wash and put them on there, but they will fall off if you're not careful. Again, this is just for us, so it doesn't matter. But if you're wanting to make sure that they really stick because you're making them for your company, then I would definitely say do the egg wash. But this is perfect because we're going to toast these in the oven so they don't, or I should say in the toaster oven. So I don't want them super brown on the top, and just because they're going to get toasted. So anyways, buns are done, and we're just waiting on the bread, and then they'll be ready as well. Okay, so it's been 30 minutes, and the bread is now done, and I realize that the lighting kind of changes the look of it, but it's got a nice golden brown. As soon as it comes out, I know some people will tell you to stick a thermometer inside. You don't have to. If you thump it, and it's got a nice hard thump to it, it's done. I've never put a thermometer in bread before. I don't feel like it's necessary. Plus, I feel like if you do that, it causes the bread to collapse. So there's no need for it. I'll see my husband's outside sawing something right now, so I don't know if you can hear it. If you can hear that thump, that's what you're looking for, to make sure. Now you do want to pop these out of the pan, because again, you don't want the steam from the bread to keep it, it'll make it soggy if you leave it in the pan. You want to be able to put it on a cooling rack and allow the air to circulate around it so it will cool. And so normally I would get 3 loaves. Today I did 2 plus 4 buns, which will work for us tonight for dinner, and that's it. And again, remember, if you want to top this with melted butter, you can, and then bake it. I choose not to because it keeps it dairy free. Just want to thank each and every one of you again for joining me today, and for those that have remained subscribers to this channel. Again, the videos will be scattered over the next month or so. as I go through surgery and recovery. But I just want to let you know that I haven't forgotten about you guys, and I have not forgotten about this channel. Once I get through this surgery and recover, I should be feeling so much better, and I can't wait to get back in the kitchen and do more videos on a regular basis and share with you guys just some of my favorite recipes. So I will leave a link below to a couple other videos that you guys could watch, and I will see you guys in the next video.